Today we kick off Ichabods of Industry, or season opener, with T.L. Price. T.L. came to Washburn from Marysville, Kansas, majored in criminal justice, and earned a Bachelor of Science degree in 1993. As a student, he was a member of Sagamore and the Student Alumni Association. And in total, he has more than 30 years of forensic science experience, having first joined the Kansas Bureau of Investigation in 1992 as a criminalist technician. He also worked for 2 years as a firearm and tool mark examiner for Fort Worth, Texas Police Department Crime Laboratory, then returned to the KBI and worked nearly 17 years as a forensic scientist. TL served as the project manager for this building, guiding the construction of the state-of-the-art Forensic Science Center, which opened in November 2015, the year of Washburn University's sesquicentennial. In April 2017, he was named laboratory director for the KBI's Forensic Science Laboratory Division, overseeing the Bureau's 4 laboratories located here on campus in Topeka, Great Bend, Kansas City, and Pittsburgh. TL has served as president of the Association of Firearms and Tool Mark Examiners and has 17 years experience as an international program assessor for the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board. Today, TL will present Serving Kansas through Washburn University and the KBI Laboratory. And then following his presentation, his staff will guide tours of the building to those who signed up in advance. So without further ado, TL.
Well, good morning. It's an honor and a pleasure to kick off the new series today. And I have to tell you, openly admit that the audiences I have spoken to in the past aren't always willing necessarily as a forensic scientist. The testimony we provide is required by the court, and usually there's only 12 folks in a small box that we speak to in a criminal attorney. So over time, again, not always wanting to hear from us, we'll go down and talk to the Kansas legislature from time to time at committees that have particular bills or things of interest in front of us. So this is unusual. People actually said they wanted to come out here and listen to something that you might have to say. So I appreciate your attendance today and absolutely excited about talking to you about a program that started years ago, just more formalized about 2013. But as Susie said, I started here at Washburn, and I guess let me back up 1 second and I'll tell you how I got here. So I came from a small town, Marysville, Kansas, about 3,500 people, not a lot of folks there. I had a strong influence by 2 very important females in my life, my grandmother and my mom. And both of them were very engaged in the public. Both of them were very influential in probably molding 5 children. I'm the oldest of 5, and Mom said, you need to be an attorney. And I said, what do you mean by that? So she put me in debate and forensics in high school. Then I went ahead and played sports, played sports there in Marysville, wrestled and played football and baseball and all those other things. But my mom always gravitated and said, well, you need to get in front of people and you need public speaking. So she did that and then thought that I needed to go to Washburn University. The tie there is my grandmother at 53 years old, who had been a business owner in Marysville for a number of years, had attended the University of Kansas in the 40s, decided at 53 she was going to go back to school and take some additional classes, and also thought she was bored, so she was going to be a sorority mother. So she was a house mom for the Alpha Phi house here on campus. And I remember as a young man in the 70s coming down and having lunch with my grandma and her friends. And then there were a lot of girls around. And she was only down here for a year or 2 in that capacity. Then she went back to Marysville and she continued being a business owner there. But I remember Grandma always having a very strong influence about Washburn University and her time here. So it was very simple for me when I decided to go to school that was something I was interested in as I was heading to Washburn. The interesting part is that I was decided to take and get a degree in criminal justice. I was a dual major, and I was one of the first to graduate with a Bachelor of Science. It used to be a Bachelor of Fine Arts back then, and I was one of the first to graduate with a Bachelor of Science degree. which means you had to have more science hours. Well, I was interested in math and science, thought that was kind of neat, but mom said I was going to law school. Back to that point, right? So I took the LSAT, did all of those things. In my senior year, I asked to have an internship. I went to Dr. Heim and Dr. Young at the time, and Ted Heim said, well, yeah, I guess the KBI Laboratory is an acceptable internship for your law enforcement piece. Usually we typically put those folks in other law enforcement agencies, but let's give it a try. So I did that, and lucky for me, it was from that day forward when I got down there in the basement of Crane Junior High building down at 1620 Tyler, down in the bowels of that building where the laboratory resided, I was influenced, and little did I know that it would affect the rest of my life. The people down there were amazing. The information that they shared with me and the work that they provided was absolutely fascinating. And I said, this is something I think I want to try. Well, then I had to have that conversation with my mother. So that was a bit interesting, and she wasn't necessarily as excited as I was, but I think she was happy that I was found something that I thought I was passionate in. So she said, go give it a try. So it was my last semester that I was pulling 18 hours to finish up here, that a job became available that didn't require college education in the state system, and it was called a criminalist technician position, and it was with the Firearms section of the KBI Laboratory. Well, I had heard there was an internal candidate, and I was pretty disappointed because I was like, oh, great. They probably already have their eyes set on somebody, and I thought, I'm interested enough, and I think this would just be super fascinating to do the rest of my life. I'm going to go ahead and apply, and I'll go through the interview process. Probably be good for me. So I went through the interview process, and lo and behold, I was selected. Well, that changed the rest and the course of what I was going to do for now 31 years. And I'm happy to say that all started at Washburn University. And today we sit in a building on the campus of Washburn University that all of you should be extremely proud of. And whether you know it or not, somehow you had some sort of influence in this project. Your tax dollars, trust me, helped pay for this place. So in 2013, we had finally something really positive come out of, if I can get this to work, very positive, that came out of discussions over 15 years in legislative committees. So this is not something that happened overnight. But what was happening is the laboratory as it existed was over capacity, meaning the number of cases coming in could actually not be worked. And so we started having what we refer to as a backlog, a number of cases that were stacking up and not enough people to do the work. So, you look and you think, okay, well, that's a simple equation. You just add more people. Well, as Director Thompson would tell you and President Farley, you can only add so many people and you can only squeeze them into a certain space. And in the basement of Crane School, there was only space for a limited number of folks. So we began to make the argument downtown that, listen, this is a bigger project. This is something that we need to add staff. The amount of work coming in, the crime that's being committed in Kansas, and the evidence analyzed at the KBI Laboratory far exceeds what our capacity is. So Washburn University comes into play because not only did they have land available, but they were willing to redesign and bolster some of the curriculum at Washburn University in a few areas that would later assist us over the course of years in hiring trained local talent. Again, I'm 100 miles from here where I grew up. This is home to me. We have a number of our scientists that are very much the same way. Kansas is where they've had their roots. They want to continue to have their roots here. So where we were at is Crane High School built, our junior high in 1928, was remodeled in 1984 for our needs at that time. And when we moved in 1984, we had a staff of 19 people and roughly 17,000 square feet. In 2013, when we moved out of that facility, we had over 70 staff in 20,000 square feet. So we were really cramped, outdated, and it lacked the ability to grow anymore. Our case submissions were growing, our turnaround times, the time it took us to produce case results for court were beyond acceptable means. They were having to release suspects or not file charges because evidence wasn't being processed quick enough. and we had no place to do that work. In addition to that, our salaries were a little suppressed, and it doesn't inspire folks to go to work every day and work in cramped facilities. So in 2013, Senate Bill 171 was passed, and we had the opportunity to partner with Washburn University. The cool thing about that, as all of you know, because you're associated with this university, is that their core values and ours, a lot of shared things involved in that. In other words, we had the same mission, the same goals, and now putting two powerful entities together to put their heads together and figure out a way to move forward was definitely the right way to go. We have enjoyed our relationship here and look forward to many more years of those things. And some of the students that raised their hands earlier, just so excited to see you. Excited to see you every semester in here. We host some 15 to 18 different classes and laboratories in this building since we moved in every semester. So a lot of busyness going on. In 2013, they authorized the KBI to design, construct, and equip a new forensic science laboratory, and further authorized the KBI Department of Administration to negotiate and execute a lease for purchase. They put our two entities together formally, which was nice. Again, remember, 1992, I had an internship here. So this is not something that was new for us. We had had interns from 92 to 2013, but really not a formalized program. So after 2013, we got to moving pretty quickly on putting the first piece of that puzzle together, which was growing some space where then we could add staff. And this appeared in the Topeka Capital Journal in September 2014. Those of you that were around during that time probably got to see some of this process as it grew. And before, earlier, I had a construction video on here that was a time lapse. It's kind of interesting. We'll put it on later and just watch the building literally grow out of the ground. Some of the details of that Senate bill were passed in 2013 was really the groundbreaking that occurred in 2014 on April 30th. And a couple of guys that held gold shovels and had hats on are in the audience right now. Director Kirk Thompson, who's always been a huge fan of the KBI and Washburn University, previously introduced, and Dr. Farley. So I can't thank those gentlemen enough because they have really paved the way for forensic science services in Kansas for the future. That construction was completed in October 2015. Our grand opening occurred in November 2015. So if you're trying to do math real quick, about 17 months to build this building, about 27 months overall for the entire project. As Susie mentioned before, I was the project manager on this building, and they moved me to something else and then something else. I think they're trying to find something that I'm good at, but I was busy for 3 years just working with things that I had never touched before. As I previously alluded to, I've been a scientist most of my career, and now for 3 years I'm going to go work with contractors. So that was an interesting learning experience, but a good one. We had a fantastic team, used a lot of local talent, and the result of that is what you're standing in today. For Washburn, this allowed our ability to grow forensic scientists in Kansas, retain those valued employees that will help stabilize future forensic science as we know it here in Kansas, which was just awesome. They're going to produce a lot of students like the ones you see today that hopefully will have a track in one of our specific testing disciplines. It's a high quality education in a number of different areas, and the programs that are touched really vary. Now I've listed 4 or 5 of them up here, but there are other things that we have over the course of time collaborated on that we didn't have any idea or think about before we moved in here. KTWU does a lot of our training videos that we're producing now with them. They've helped with a lot of things. We borrowed statisticians from the math department to help on research projects that, without this cooperative effort or this collaboration, we probably would never have thought about those things. And it's been easy, so sure appreciate that. The other thing that it did for our staff, it allowed our scientists to stay engaged in the academic setting, right? So we provide a number of adjunct faculty now in classes, and currently I think we have 3 adjuncts and we have 15 different guest speakers throughout the semester that will talk to various classes about various things that are happening and relate those experiences, work experiences, to the students going through those things. And I think that's truly important, especially when we get into the interview process and we look to actually bring them on board. So the results of the hard work here, our internship program really started to formalize in 2016. Again, we moved in 2015, got our legs underneath us in about the summer of 2016. We've had 38 total interns. They come from all over the United States. So I think that's important to know too, because this is a program here, we want homegrown talent, but I will tell you, we compete nationally with laboratories all over the country. I have folks from both coasts. I have them as close as the Canada border and as close as Texas you can get to Mexico. So we cover the entire state with the folks that come in here, are hired and are working in our areas. The cool thing is that of the 38 total interns that we've had, 24 of those are Washburn students. So the majority of our interns are coming from right here. And we've hired 7 of those folks already. That is awesome since 2016. Now that may not seem like a lot to you folks. I will tell you that we have 9 total Washburn graduates on our staff. So 7 of those came since 2016. And about 18 months during this period of time, we weren't taking any internships because of some little thing they called COVID. So we've been busy with that, and Washburn has been extremely helpful and very busy with our internship program. Our scientific staff's made up of about 65 different scientists. 31 of those folks have a Kansas degree. And again, 9 of those are from Washburn. And again, some of the other things we participate in, again, are guest speakers and adjunct professors, and then collaboration amongst students and professors across really the entire campus. Our laboratory is broken up into 4 different areas as far as service is concerned. You're sitting in our flagship headquarters laboratory, if you will. Our Forensic Science Center here in Topeka. We also have a Great Bend operation. We have an operation in Pittsburgh and also Kansas City. All of those operations are much smaller. So for example, Great Bend has about 7 or 8 scientists. Pittsburgh, we only have 2 scientists and an evidence control center specialist down there. And in Kansas City, we have a total of 5 scientists and an evidence control center specialist there. So much smaller operations, but it helps us serve our customers across the state. So they don't have to drive all their evidence to Topeka. They can take it to one of those locations and then we transfer those things to them. Some of the testing areas that some of you will see, and many of you signed up for the tour, and if you miss that opportunity, stick around and we'll get you in. The areas that we're testing in right here in this laboratory include biology DNA. So we're looking at blood samples or saliva, any kind of body fluid, and trying to type it. We also do blood stain pattern analysis. So based on a bloodshed event, not something you want to think about necessarily, but unfortunately it happens. And then we try to reconstruct that particular scene and determine where an individual was, where he or she was shot or perhaps beaten by something. Chemistry is our very busy section with controlled substances. In fact, one of your tour guides is here today. I'll embarrass her for a second in the far corner. Krista is our section supervisor in chemistry. She is also a Washburn grad. She'll be taking some of our tour folks around. So they look at a number of different dangerous substances now. The scare with fentanyl that you've heard about, it's real, it's in Kansas. Those are the kinds of things that they test on a regular basis. Our DNA data bank folks, those are folks that are processing any felon in Kansas that's been arrested for a felony or 7 different misdemeanors. At the time of arrest, we take a sample. And I've got a few of you on a list. I think Kurt Thompson, I want to get your sample. There were a couple more. Russ Bonner, I want to make sure you get your sample. So we keep that in a database, and then anytime we have a crime that's committed in Kansas, they search that DNA profile against that convicted offender database. We have about 30 hits against that a month. So that's a very productive database. Digital evidence, those folks up there in our digital evidence section are looking at mobile devices. There's probably a lot of phones in this room right now. Some of you, unfortunately, may even have 2 of them that you haul around. And if you have children, first of all, my apologies. I know it's difficult. Work through it. Lots of mobile devices and lots of electronic devices. Things they should be doing on them and things that people shouldn't be doing on them. And so we look at that information as related to a particular event, perhaps a travel path, that sort of thing, when we have a court order to do so. Our Evidence Control Center is the heart of all of our operations. That's really where things begin. So we analyze crime scenes from all over the state of Kansas, 105 counties, and over 400 contributors will submit evidence to our laboratory every year. And those things being artifacts that are collected at a crime scene, and that could be something like a cigarette butt, it might be the tool of a crime, maybe a gun or a knife, a baseball bat, something like that, or an article of clothing. Those things are then submitted and we do a number of tests on them. Our Evidence Control Center receives those things at Great Bend, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Topeka. We do that in person every day. I will tell you that when COVID hit, we did not go home. We continue to accept evidence and we continue to process those things. Many folks in other offices, including our partners in the criminal justice system, the larger criminal justice system, many of those prosecutors' offices closed down. We did not. Crime continued. I know, it's a strange thing, right? The one thing that people ask about a lot that don't probably know me real well is say, well, you know, what's this crime trend like? It says it's up or they say it's down. And I will tell you this, in 30 years, it looks like this to me. It's just like this. It hasn't changed. And I didn't say like this, I said like this. So business is good, is what I always tell folks, unfortunately, but that is reality. Our firearm and tool mark section, that's where I grew up. That's the science that I studied for years. And that looked at bullets and cartridge cases, perhaps at crime scenes, and compare it to a suspect's firearm, for instance. And then we do a number of other interesting things in there that involve tool marks. You can think of a tool mark as a simple hand tool that may be cutting a padlock with a pair of bolt cutters, or something maybe that you don't consider, which is a knife in the body and excising a wound and looking at cartilage, for example, to see a mark that's left by a knife. Our latent print section, very productive section, very busy, looking at anything that you might touch. So when you leave here today, take your coffee cup with you or throw it in the trash. Our folks pick up those things and they'll process them in classes a lot of the time. So the students there that identify themselves earlier, they'll get a chance if they're taking some of those classes that we hold in 182 to actually work on some of that kind of work. Our toxicology section, unfortunately in the state of Kansas, is very busy. I don't know any state that it's not, but the state of Kansas is not immune to drunk driving and drug driving. People that are under prescription medication that has overwhelmed their system and now they're acting in such a manner that's dangerous when they're driving, and we look at those samples. So we'll look at urine and blood samples that are drawn, and unfortunately, sad enough, there's a ton of those that occur in Kansas every day. In fact, every day that we're here, we open about 50, 55, almost, I think this last, I'll pull it up here in a minute, but I think it's almost 60 cases a day are new cases. Our trace PGSR fire debris analysis, folks, they're looking at primer gunshot residue that might be left behind from the discharge of a firearm. They're looking at what we call SEM stubs, which is really sticky-sided tape. And then they're looking at those particles that are collected from the surface. And then they also do a lot of fire debris analysis, so arson investigation, and they might have charred remains. We house those in a new pristine paint can. We actually purchase those things like you buy at Lowe's that have paint in them. But these are brand new, and they are used only for our samples, and we keep and house those in there so that those volatile chemicals remain in that can until we get a chance to analyze them. So what I did want to share with you is some of the progress, because I think that is the cool part, and that's really what the goal was of this group, being Washburn, the KBI, state of Kansas. Well, I'll just talk from this. So we open up about 60 new cases a day. Last year, fiscal year 2023, so that would have been, it ended in June 30th of 2023, and was from the previous July 1. We analyzed 54,901 items. Those are individual items that come in from crime scenes, so almost 55,000 items. We also issued just over 25,000 laboratory reports. That's our scientists generating that work, putting their opinions on paper, and then going to testify in court. We also received over 3,300 subpoenas for testimony. That's a lot of subpoenas. In fact, we have a couple scientists that receive more subpoenas than there are working days in the year. So we're very, very busy. And then we have leave that they have. And some of them think they want to have babies. And so I'm like, wait a second. We've got subpoenas those days. I joke about it, but we have those kind of discussions with attorneys from time to time, and it's amazing. Some of them take it really well, and some of them don't. They're like, wait a second, we have her subpoenaed, and she's a critical witness. I'm like, well, that's great, but she's probably in labor. And so we have to work around those kind of things all the time. So the 3,300 subpoenas are always a challenge every year, and those things continue to grow. Approximately 42% of all of our assignments of the work coming in were completed in 60 days. So about half of the workload that comes in is done within 60 days. Now that 60 days became important because that's what we were told was necessary to process things through the criminal justice system. Now that was prior to COVID. And I will tell you, it is a slow system right now. So our 42% of those things being produced in 60 days is fantastic. We're continually working and increasing those things, but to give you something that's relative, in 2013, about 20% of our work was produced in 60 days. So we've made some major progress. Our overall backlog of cases is now down 2,000 assignments from 2018. There's a guy in the room that can't help himself right now because he's probably not heard that information, but that's what this has done. That's amazing. Our overall staff of 93, that is up from about 70 in 2013. So we've added 23 more people to start working through this workload. And in the next 12 years, we're projected to hire about 20 more. We continue to work in those upward directions, and that's what this program was designed for. And I'm here to tell you that it's working well. So just again, pleased to be part of this lecture series and opening things off. A lot of pressure for me because they said, hey, listen, you're our first speaker, don't mess this up. And I said, I will try real hard. Most people don't like to hear me talk, but this group actually paid to be here, so it's very difficult. I'll open it up for any questions that you might have, and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about, and then we will release you into the large atrium area, and Krista will organize probably 3 different groups. We've got 2 other tour guides, so a total of 3 folks to show you around. But I'm happy to answer anything that you might have. Nothing at all. Nothing's done. Promise you. Remember, I work with attorney and police officers.
2 questions. Yes. How's your relationship? Do your scientists go over to Stouffer Hall to teach, or the faculty come over here to teach? And then secondly, is this building big enough to handle the additional size of staff you're going to have the next few years?
Yeah, great questions. So first of all, our staff does go and teach in various areas across campus. There are 3 adjuncts right now that we have on staff. The interesting thing is we also lost one of our scientists that became a professor over here in the chemical forensic chemistry area. And that's not a bad thing. Those are great opportunities both ways. Is it big enough? First of all, classes in here. We teach classes in here. We speak to classes in here, and there are about 15 different classes that include instruction like just instruction like this, or laboratory instruction each semester. And then secondly, is the building big enough to hold future staff? That's a great question, and a lot of folks probably overlook it. This building was built for 20 years out and projected for a total of 108 people in it. So yes, the cost of the overall project was $55 million. That included everything. That was all the soft costs. And we had a very interesting relationship with the city of Topeka, the Topeka Public Building Commission, and Washburn University to make all that happen. And then last July, not this July, but last July, the Kansas legislature, I pushed a little bit and said, hey, can we refinance our bonds? Because prices were good. And I knew that was going to get some real attention. And it did. And they said, well, let's just pay it off. So now we own the building. And we're working with Washburn to transfer those things in the way of paperwork, really. But it doesn't change our relationship with Washburn University at all. This relationship will continue as long as this building is here and as long as we have forensic science. And I will tell you that, again, business is good. Any other questions? Yes?
Thank you for being here today. I did have a question about the classrooms and the laboratories upstairs. I know some are doing a tour and some are not. Can you talk a little bit about how many classrooms you have and then the separation between the classrooms and the KBI and kind of that format?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, great question too. And, didn't know how much detail to go into because I know we got some folks that want to go to work, not maybe want to go to work. I hope you want to go to work. Or go on the tour. But real quick, the building on this side of the house, and I call this the north end, right? So the north side of the building is what we refer to as the shared space with Washburn University. We have roughly 100,000 square feet in the building. Of that, 12 to 15,000 square feet of it are shared space with Washburn. Upstairs, as you go through the tour, you'll see a working chemistry biology laboratory, wet laboratory. So you'll see if you were in chemistry or biology labs, it'll probably, hopefully some of you don't have PTSD from that. And then others will probably be like, this is really interesting. So there's a wet lab up there, and then on each side of it is an instrument room. Those instrument rooms were designed so that you could have instruments like we use across the hall in those working areas so that you're working on those things while you're in your undergrad classes, which is super cool. So that's in chemistry and that's in biology. You'll see those things upstairs, and then there's small research spaces up there as well. When you're up there and you look across to the south, you'll be able to see some of our scientists working through the windows. And you'll also get a sense of how large the building is and how large the operation is. Everything to the south is what we refer to as a controlled space. It is really, that is where the work behind the curtains happens with the KBI Laboratory. And that is really our part of this. If you go out here and go down the hallway, again to the, I'm kind of directionally challenged, so to the right or the west, and then you end up in a large vehicle bay. I refer to it as 182A. That's where a lot of our anthropology, forensic anthropology, and some of our criminal justice classes occur. It's a wonderful training space. The tables are made specifically so you can lay out an entire skeleton and look at the interesting things you might find in bones or artifacts that are being recovered. So that is also a very used space here at the facility. This is also a shared space with Washburn University. In fact, this fancy sign up here comes off, and we have a logo or the crest for Washburn University that goes on there for when they have speaking series and things like that that are Washburn specific. So works out pretty well. We also have a few other things that are used from time to time between the two, but those are kind of the layout of the land. Did that cover?
Yeah,
one
great.
more question?
No, that was good.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. Anything else? Yes.
Gil, there's a number of students and maybe future students here. What would you tell them is the best path to take if they wanted to work in a field like this?
Yeah, so great question, and I've also told folks this. Hired folks now, probably been in the hiring role for about 20 years, and so I've seen a lot of students from various programs and various degrees, and jokingly, but not, I tell folks now, my degree was in criminal justice. Granted, I went back to school at Washburn, took some more biology and chemistry after I was an employee, but I didn't have that track, that science track. And I tell folks that my degree probably wouldn't get me in the door. That a hard science degree is really what we're looking for in most of the areas that we hire. And when I say hard science, I'm talking about chemistry, biology, physics, biochemistry, those kind of things for a scientist position. Now, are there exceptions? Absolutely. And I will tell you that the bonus for us and for you is an internship with us. That will give us a look at your work ethic and what you're like and your interest. It also gives you the opportunity to look at that and say, wow, this is not what I see on TV. Or, man, this is super interesting. This is something I can see myself doing for years. So that's the piece. If I had one piece of advice for a young student that was looking at a career in this field is get an internship, make sure it's something that you like. Again, I was heading to law school is what I thought I was doing. And my mom really thought I was doing that. And then I had an internship and I was like, wow, I had no idea that this existed. Anything else? Yes?
Do your interns go into each different program that you have, or is it just one?
Yeah, so our internships, and it's pretty much the same as it was back in 1992. We will designate a particular area in a project, and we do two things. We ask a student to bring us a project if they're interested in an internship, and then we also have some projects that we have sitting aside that we think will help further the science in a particular area in our interest. And those are more formal now than they used to be. So they will spend their time maybe in firearms or maybe in latent prints or biology. We have a lot of internships I know in firearms, latent prints, biology, and chemistry. I see a lot of interns go through those programs. We've had them in digital evidence. In fact, we hired 2 folks in digital evidence from our computer science area that had interns or internships. And again, it's a great look at what that employee looks like day in and day out and whether they can do the job. And it's a great look for the student to say, yeah, this is not what I wanted, or man, this is exactly what I want to do the rest of my life. I don't consider this a job, it is a career. And I tell all of our students and all of our new staff the same thing. Every one of them comes to talk to me. I try to make sure I find them the first week they're here and have those kind of discussions, because I feel so strongly about that because the work is so difficult and it's also so important. Somebody's liberty is in your hands each time you're looking at something, so you can't take that lightly. And if somebody's just punching the clock, checking in, checking out, that's not the right person for this kind of work. Yes?
Do you limit the number of interns that you have, or do you say we're going to take 3 interns or 5 interns for a semester, and then you pick between the people who apply?
So yes and no. And when I say yes and no, it depends on what we have going on, whether we limit things or not. We do in theory and on paper, and then we have humans over there that look at students and go, gosh, I want to give them an opportunity. And so we said, okay, we're only going to have 1 in an area, and then we ended up with 2 because they were really good students. And we thought, man, they can really contribute. So to answer the question simply, I think it just depends on what our internship pool looks like. We've had as many as 6 at one time staff here. And that's a lot of folks to balance. We have an internship coordinator now. As part of her duties, she's also our quality assurance manager. She came from the DNA section, Rachel White, and Rachel does a tremendous job on making sure you touch base with the intern on a regular basis, that they're getting the things done and they're getting the support they need, and hey, are you doing okay with what you're seeing? Is that bothering you? Those kind of things. And that's what I talk about. That's what I'm talking about. We formalized that program a lot more. Nobody did those kind of things back in 92. We had, hey, how you doing? Let me see your paper. Are you getting that project done? This is what we're doing. And then, those things change over time. So we've really formalized that and made that something that we're proud of and something the student would be proud of. Yes?
Regarding your fingerprint identification, on the crime shows on TV, they'll say, well, this suspect's prints are not in CODIS. Is that really the way it works, or how do you find fingerprints?
Yeah, so good question. And our latent print folks are processing all kinds of things all the time. And some of the reports, they'll have no friction ridge detail present on an item, so there just wasn't something there. And then other times they'll identify ridge detail of value, what they call a value. And when that happens, we will compare it to a 10-print card, typically from an arrest, if we have a suspect. And then if we don't have a suspect, we'll enter it into that AFIS, which is the Automated Fingerprint Identification System. And we have about 30 hits a month in that system as well. Both CODIS and AFIS, about 30 hits across the state each month. We have a lot of repeat offenders. A lot of folks that do things over and over again don't seem to learn. And that database is really important. Now, there are times where you'll search a unknown latent print in there and you won't get a hit. There's nothing in there. So then the case is not necessarily cold. You're just out looking and seeing if you can find another suspect, work the case a little different way, and maybe develop another suspect, and then they submit a 10-print card for us to compare. Yeah. But there's times we'll enter things into those databases and don't get anything at all. Yes, ma'am?
Your database of DNA and those types of things, is that shared in any sort of way across state as well, or how does that work?
Yeah, so good question, and in the weeds for that system, we have what they call the national database, and then we have the state database. The state database feeds into the national, and then if you have a national search, it'll happen if you categorize it and say, okay, let's say, for example, our suspect came from California. Well, now let's search from here to California in that database, or maybe we open up and search the national database. But our state database, that's compiled and searched on a regular basis here, both CODIS and APHIS. And you can search locally, or you can increase that search however you would like. Some of those things are set up so they're done every 4 hours automatically to a certain region, and then others you have to upload so that it'll go national, and then it might be overnight, for example. A good story that I can't share a ton of details about because it's still an active investigation, but you probably heard there were some things going on in Chunga Trail, that somebody was injured, and we worked part of that case pretty quickly. When they developed a suspect, the suspect they developed was eliminated. So we do a lot of that. Hey, it's a suspect, we look at those things and go, yeah, no, it's not. DNA is different, gotta be somebody else. And then we searched it into our CODIS database. We did an emergency search, and overnight we developed at 10 o'clock the next morning, we get back, we got a hit. This guy's in the system already, so he's a repeat offender. So we got that back to our customer, which was the police department. They made an arrest. Had no idea, this guy was not on their radar at all, and now they developed somebody based on that forensic evidence. And that just recently happened. So those are the kinds of things when you read about and see the news. We like the fact that people don't talk a lot about us, but it hurts us when we go downtown or when we're trying to get money or things to do the job that we do, because they don't know what we do sometimes. But we're involved in a lot of cases across Kansas quietly, and that's okay. We like that. That's the job that we're most accustomed to and we're comfortable with. But you can assure yourself that 1 of 3 laboratories touch those crime scene articles, either the KBI Laboratory with the 4 that we have, or Sedgwick County Regional Forensic Science Center in Wichita, or Johnson County Crime Laboratory in Johnson County. We still serve all 105 counties. Our service is free. Thank you. We all pay for that. Tax dollars, called state general fund money. But we also assess what they call a laboratory fee for anybody that is convicted. And we did work on that case. They can assess a $400 fee to pay for those things that we had to use. That fee helps run our division as well. And we collect about roughly $1.2, $1.3 million a year just from that fee fund. Any other questions? Well, you've been a great audience. I haven't had to dodge anything. There hasn't been a lot of heckling. So I absolutely appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today, and I'll turn you over to our tour folks. Krista, if you want to get them organized out there in the atrium, that would be fantastic. Thank you.